Good everyone. So I'm here with Craig Roll, who is the lead maintainer of Sparrow Bitcoin Wallet. And in my opinion, it's the best desktop wallet available. So I'm very grateful to be sitting here with Craig, and I have an opportunity to ask him what's on my mind. And hopefully you have the same questions in the back of your mind as well. So yeah, Craig, my name is Cole. I teach Bitcoin self-custody on YouTube, including Sparrow Wallet. So I'm very involved in using Sparrow. I'm in that software every day. And yeah, so very happy to be here with Craig. So Craig, the first question I have for you is, why did you actually build Sparrow Wallet? Did you see an issue with existing wallets that were out back when you built Sparrow, or was it just for yourself to use it yourself? Why did you build Sparrow?
Yeah, so what I was trying to do way back in the day was look at my own needs, and I was trying to follow what was best practice then, and I think it's still best practice now, was to create a multi-vendor, multi-sig wallet, which is basically using different hardware wallets from different manufacturers to create a multi-sig wallet. And I was trying to use the Electrum wallet to do it, which is an OG wallet, really amazing wallet. It's been around since 2011, which is really a long time, and not a long time after Bitcoin's birth. But the trouble with software is that often it kind of gets a bit stuck in the era in which it was first built, with that first kind of idea. And I think the Electrum wallet is a little bit in that camp. It's still a great wallet in many respects. It's still a very trusted wallet by many people, but I don't feel that it can handle everything today. And as I said, I was battling to use it for this particular use case. I was building little tools on the side which enabled me to do this multi-sig wallet, and I really didn't trust that I would be able to replicate this. It just felt like a house of cards that I was doing. That's kind of the impetus where it began. And I'd really started off by just building a transaction editor, just being able to comprehensively change the transactions and kind of and then kind of almost didn't realize the full scope of what I was attempting until I actually got into it. So that was the kind of start of it, but I would say that I almost didn't want to admit to myself how big the task was until I was somewhere.
So was Sparrow at all intended for beginners or mainly power users who are using multi-sig and tools like that? And secondly, did you expect Sparrow to become such a popular tool?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I started building it, I wanted to really feel in control of my funds. I wanted to have full visibility all the way down to what was actually going on the Bitcoin protocol level. That was what I wanted, because I'm thinking to myself, I need to understand what's going on and be able to check and verify things. As we all know, once you sit in the transaction, it's final. You can't pull it back. So you really need to have that certainty that what you're doing is the correct thing, right? And when I was building Sparrow, I was building it with these ideas in mind and thinking to myself, this is going to be a power user tool to, but that's what I want to do, so I'm going to go and do it. What I was really surprised was the reaction of the global Bitcoin community, who clearly wanted the same things, right? There's this age-old adage of the open source developer scratching their own itch, and then it turns out that a lot of people have the same itch. So I have and I continue to be really surprised by how popular Sparrow has become. I guess I'm a little bit kind of used to that world now, but I guess what I've learned through that is people don't mind detail so long as it's the right detail. They don't mind being shown the right thing so long as it's shown in the right way. And the way Sparrow is designed is to gradually show things and allow you to hide things if you don't really want that level. So giving users the optionality to be able to control what they see and what they don't see. There's a lot of wallets out there that provide a very simple, receive, send, this is your balance, these are your actions. And that's, I think, a good way to start. But it seems to me that most people want a little bit more than that. They want to be able to actually know what they're doing. And that's, I guess, the market that I'm attracted to.
Yeah, I think that's what's so great about Sparrow is that it gives you access to all these advanced features. You can see things that other wallets generally hide from you, but it still keeps things pretty simple. So it's actually a great tool for learning Bitcoin, I would say. If you're a beginner, just jumping into Sparrow and kind of reading up on everything you see is a great way to master self-custody. So my next question for you was, I imagine before you built Sparrow, you were already a developer, so you were writing code already. What did it take to master Bitcoin to build something like Sparrow Wallet? What kind of documentation were you reading? Yeah, how did you really grasp self-custody and how it works underneath the hood?
Yeah, I mean, I started learning about Bitcoin way back like 2012. Started reading, and the information was generally pretty poor for those that were around at that time. If you went online, you just saw a lot of really very average information compared to what you see today. However, there were two textbooks that were around at the time I started actually building Sparrow, which was many years down the line. One was the Mastering Bitcoin book, and the other one was Jimmy Song's book, Programming Bitcoin. And if you actually see the little, every time you create a transaction in Sparrow, you've got a little hex of the actual transaction, and the highlighting of the hex is actually inspired from Jimmy Song's book. So, those two books together kind of really explain the fundamentals of what our kind of modern HD wallets are and how they work. I would recommend it today. They still very much capture the ethos of what our common Bitcoin wallet does.
Sweet. Okay. So now I want to talk about self-custody and people actually building their own setups to secure their coins. And I've helped many people with this, and a key issue I see is that many Bitcoin users, they've set up their hardware wallet, they've set up Sparrow, they don't actually understand what's going on behind the scenes. So they don't understand backups and recovery. So how important do you think it is to actually understand these concepts before building your setup? How important to understand seeds, phrases, private keys, backups, recovery, before you actually build your full card setup or your multi-sig?
Yeah, I mean, how much do we ever understand it? But I think, it's okay to start without understanding everything, because nobody really understands everything, right? I'm not a mathematician. I understand more than most, of course, but I don't think about the discrete log, principles that stand behind Bitcoin's security every day. I don't understand it like some people do. So what I guess my message is that you shouldn't wait to think that I need to completely understand everything before I can start, because then you probably will never start. I would try and get some basic understanding going. Try and sort of get the basic concepts behind seed words and how they translate into the security of your wallet. Some fundamental principles which every hardware wallet manufacturer will tell you when they ship those wallets to you. And they'll say, well, these are your seed words, never reveal them, don't take photo loss of them. Like, there's certain basic concepts that I think you do need to get. But then I think from there, the best way to learn is to actually use it. So if you don't do anything, then you're just not going to learn. You need to start with hopefully small amounts and then build up your knowledge over time. So I would encourage people to do regular transactions using it, get a feeling for it. It's unfortunately the reality that many people set the thing up and then they just leave it. They just say, it's done now, and then all of that knowledge that they gained is then lost. So one piece of advice is to try and find some service that you can pay with Bitcoin on a regular basis, say a monthly service. For example, I paid for the server. I was sparrowwallet.com with Bitcoin, and it forces me to make that transaction every single month. And that's a really important thing because it gets me into that system. So I would encourage people to try and find something in your life that you need to actually use the wallet for. And then you start to get a feeling for how it works. And that familiarity breeds the kind of properties that you want.
100% agree that I think the best way to master site custody is to put a small balance on your phone, start with a basic wallet like Blue, move funds around, practice seed recovery, and that's the best way to master this technology. So my next question is, do you think there's a point where too much security becomes dangerous? For example, if someone doesn't necessarily understand a coordinator file and they're using multi-sig, do you think they're at more risk of locking themselves out of their funds or of an attack?
Yeah, I mean, I think most in this room will guess what I'm going to answer here. Yeah, look, more funds have certainly been lost. More Bitcoin has been lost by people making mistakes than has ever been lost for being attacked. However, that is to say, people are getting, unfortunately, attacked more. The incidence of bridge attacks is growing in the world, and that's a sad truth, but it is a truth we nevertheless need to face. So I would encourage people to start simple, start with a single sig, perhaps add a passphrase if you get a sense of what that is and how to sort of use it. And then the multi-sig thing is really quite a big step up. I wouldn't say be scared of it. It's really not actually that difficult in the grand scheme of things, but it is a step up, and I wouldn't encourage anyone to start it. That's not the right place to start. Do it if you are, you have some specific security concerns. I would say that single sig with a passphrase is probably enough for most people. So long as you practice, keeping your Bitcoin holdings quiet. That is the most important thing. Don't talk about how much you have. By all means, talk about Bitcoin. There's no issue with that. But you don't want to get into the specifics of how much you have, how you hold it, all of that kind of thing. That's information that you keep to yourself. And so long as you practice that, the single sig should be really fine for most people up to normal values that you store. So that would be my simple advice.
Yeah, and my next question was on passphrases, which I think you already answered, which was, do you recommend passphrases? So I'll move on then, and the next question was general security with Sparrow Wallet and hot wallets. Many people are completely afraid to use hot wallets. They only use cold storage. How secure are hot wallets?
Yeah, it's a question I always have to be cautious about because the reality is a hot wallet is one where the seed phrase is stored on the computer. You're not using separate hardware wallets to store it. I have never heard of Sparrow Wallet, the hot wallet, being compromised. I've never even had a suspicion that it was. So, obviously I hear various stories of various people doing odd things and losing funds, but I've never had anything that has made me think that doesn't sound good. It sounds like there was an hack here. So that's, I think, just a little anecdotal piece of information, which is, I think, if Sparrow hot wallets were being hacked and funds were being drained, I would have heard about it in some way or form at this point. So I think that does answer the question to some extent. I think hot wallets are relatively secure, certainly for spending amounts. If you can afford a hardware wallet, definitely go down that path. It's definitely a more secure thing to do. Sparrow, just to describe how Sparrow does hot wallets, is it keeps the seed phrase encrypted within the encrypted file. So you should always be using a password, not a passphrase in this case, a password on your wallet file when using a hot wallet with Sparrow. Otherwise, you have no security other than your computer's security. So long as you're doing that, you basically have the encrypted wallet file, and then you have encryption within the wallet file. And every time you sign, you have to re-enter your password. What Sparrow does is it decrypts that piece of encryption within the wallet file, signs it, and then forgets it. It does that all in RAM, and it forgets it immediately. So your decrypted seed is only ever present in RAM for an instant. Just that instant required to sign that thing, and then it is removed. Now, that's not a guarantee. I'm not trying to make it more than it is. But I do think that it makes it pretty hard for some buyers to come along and say, hey, I can get your seed sealed. Because now you've got to crack it twice. You've got to get into the wallet file, and then you've got to get into the encryption again.
Yeah, I would say for the long-term cold storage, well, for long-term storage, you definitely want a hardware wallet. And that's for your larger stack amount, but for smaller amounts, it's perfectly okay to be using a hard wallet like Sparrow. So if you are using a hardware wallet with something like Sparrow, do you need a dedicated computer for that setup, or are you happy to just use it with your daily driver? And on top of that as well, if your computer is malware infested and you're using a cold card or a hardware wallet, are you still safe?
So these talk to questions of computer hygiene. So the answer to your first question is really a question of how much computer hygiene do you have, and to some extent as well, what operating system do you run. So if you're on Windows, there's no question you're on a less secure operating system than if you're running Linux or Mac OS. And as a result, your computer hygiene will have to be a lot higher because Windows is just a lot more open to various undesirable things. I wouldn't say that it is required that you have a dedicated clean computer, because most of us are just not going to do that. And I think the worst thing we can do is just not interact with Bitcoin at all. Rather interact, because the chances of you actually losing your funds to a hack if you're using a hardware wallet are pretty low anyway. They're really, really, really low. So if you are using a computer with malware on it, so let's say, for example, you have malware that replaces the contents of your clipboard whenever you copy. So you copy an address, the malware comes along and says, oh, I see that's Bitcoin address, I'm going to replace it with my own. You paste that into Sparrow. Sparrow doesn't know, because it has no way of knowing. It goes to the hardware wallet, and that's when you need to really check and say, so Sparrow may in fact be showing the right address, and Sparrow may be hacked, but the hardware wallet will always show you the correct thing, because it's a trusted, secure, and separate computing environment. So that's the big advantage that a hardware wallet has. And one of the reasons, incidentally, why hardware wallets without screens are much less secure than hardware wallets with screens. I said, Joseph. The answer is, if you have a computer with malware on it, you should sort that out, right? That's the best answer. That's not a good place to be. But if you're using a hardware wallet, you should be safe, so long as you check the address thoroughly every time you send.
Yeah, so never blind sign a transaction, never approve a transaction on your hardware wallet without double checking the address on the hardware itself. I guess that's what you're getting at. So talking about hardware wallets, what features in hardware wallets do you look for? And do you have any personal favorite hardware wallets? I know you mentioned multi-sig, multi-vendor. So can you speak to that a bit? Which hardware wallets and what features do you look for?
Yeah, I'm not really going to get too much into this, because I try not to. I try with Sparrow to provide as many options as I can, and I think that for me to assume what certain people's requirements are is not the correct thing. So, for example, the cold card, great hardware wallet. It's not the cheapest, right? It does cost some money. So I quite like it, but on the other hand, I recognize that ordering this thing from a company in Canada is not the easiest thing in the world. There are cheaper ones, and you generally give up some amount, so you can buy, for example, a Blockstream Jade. It doesn't have a secure element on it, and I do think a secure element has been proven over time to be a good safeguard. Generally, those hardware wallets without secure elements on them they tend to have more attacks or more records of ways that you can attack it than those that do. And the ones that have more secure elements on them, they generally tend to be less as well, because to attack a secure element, it is possible, but you're going to have to take that particular chip, you're going to have to do various physical things to it, and you can damage or destroy the chip in doing so. So you have a possibility of extracting the seed out of anything, but the chances of doing so get really low when you have to get the seed out of two different things. Now you have to get it right twice in a way. So, there's a lot of different nuances when it comes to hardware wallets. I think I think the idea of sticking to the well-known ones makes a lot of sense because people are coming out with new hardware wallets all the time. I know because I have to support them. I can't say much about the new guys because they haven't been around for many years. They haven't faced the scrutiny that the older guys have. So I would say be cautious around the newer ones. Don't necessarily, just like you would with a new wallet, right? Don't necessarily put all your funds into something which has come on the market and new. Rather stick to the older guys until the new guys have had a little chance to prove themselves in the market and have something to test.
Yeah, so I guess you too many things you look for secure elements, and it's just being battle tested in general. If it's got years of being used by thousands of people, we know it's probably safe, right? So next, privacy. I want to talk about privacy inside of Sparrow Wallet now. Unfortunately, Samurai Whirlpool no longer operates. Do you have any tips for on-chain privacy? What other tools can we use for on-chain privacy? And as well, I know you are working on silent payments, so if you could speak a bit about that.
Right, so lots there. So I'll talk a bit about privacy in general first. So we had a chat earlier today with Carl talking about how to ensure that you are not traced on the blockchain. And you need to kind of think a little bit about how people actually trace. So, for example, if you have a series of transactions on the blockchain, what these blockchain firms are looking at is the change of ownership of funds. That's the key thing that they're trying to do. So they know, for example, they have to have a starting point. They have to say here, UTXO X is owned by, say, Joe, and Joe makes a series of transactions, and at some point, some illegal thing happens, some payment happens, which they want to try and figure out who made it. So if they are confident that Joe, who had the original UTXO, owned that value all the way through the chain, through a variety of different UTXOs, until that payment was made, well, then they're going to go after Joe. But if they know that, for example, if they think that it went to, say, Mary in the middle, then they're going to go after Mary. And if they don't know who Mary is, then Joe's kind of safe, right? What you want to do is ensure that that flow is obfuscated on the chain so that people can't see where that value of funds is going or the probability. And this is why it's a probability game is greatly increased or reduced. Right? Every transaction that it goes through is going to say, well, was this the payment output? Was this the change output? Let's go on from there. Was this the payment output? Was this the change output? A practical thing you can do that follows from this is if you send a payment, try not to send a round amount. Very simple thing to do. That it's quite obvious that if one amount is the round amount and one amount is just some random looking number, then it's pretty clear to everyone which is the payment amount. Very easy to do. So I would like, if you're going to send a payment to somebody, your friend, just send them a little bit more. It makes you more private and they feel good because they got a small amount of sense, right? Very simple thing you can do right there. Sparrow has a ability, it's down at the bottom of the send tab, where you can have an efficiency send, which tries to reduce your fees, or you can have a privacy spend, which increases the amount that you pay, but it does what is called a fake two-person coin join. And effectively, it looks like two people are coming together to do a coin join, so contributing funds, and then there are two payment outputs going out of the same amount. So again, looking at that probability, you now have the firm doing that work now has to say, well, which of these is the actual payment because they're both the same amount, right? Even if they were round amounts, they don't know which of those two. That cuts their probability in half. Given no other information, cuts it in half. That's a big deal. Like if you're saying multiplying 75% by 50%, you can see that just that one transaction in the chain makes a big difference. So it is sometimes worth paying the small amount of additional fees in order to reduce the probability. That's what real privacy on chain looks like. So those are the kind of things that I would do. Sparrow also has a little icon at the bottom just next to that privacy button, which gives you some idea of how private the transaction that you are creating is. So it will tell you if there's a round amount and then to various other things. Use that to try and ensure that you when you create a transaction, you're kind of thinking about how private it is. You ask about silent payments. So that's a whole another thing which I can talk about for a long time. I'll kind of give a very high level view of it. So we have had this kind of model of wallets for a long time, which is based off this standard called BIP32, which is an HD wallet and allows us to basically create lots of addresses. Silent payments is a completely different approach, and it allows us to have this thing which we've wanted in Bitcoin for a really long time. It's called a static payment code. Right now, we have to ask for a new address in order to be private, at least. We have to ask for a new address from whoever we're paying whenever we pay them, which, when you think about it from a payment mechanism, is actually quite unusual in this modern day and age. When we send to a bank account, we can send to the same bank account number over and over, and we don't have to keep asking for a new one. With Bitcoin, I think it's certainly not ideal that we have to keep asking for a new one, because people don't, and then we get something called address reuse. So silent payments gives us a static payment code, and it eliminates address reuse in the same manner. So in that, it kind of that's the big thing that it does for us. And I think one of the most interesting aspects is that we have address reuse in Bitcoin today, and we'd be a lot better off from a privacy perspective without it. So it's really great that it does that. And then the other thing is a bit of a technical point, where we've got this issue in the current wallets called the gap limit, which, for those that have heard about this, it's how far ahead the wallet looks in the chain to see whether there are funds. Then it stops and says, okay, I'm done, because it can't go on forever. It has to stop at some point. And if it stops too early, then we have a situation where you don't find all the funds in your wallet, which is really bad, because then you lose money. So eliminating this thing called the gap limit is also really important, and silent payments does that for us as well. So it sounds wonderful. Why aren't we using it today? The downside is that you have to scan for your funds on the blockchain, and that is a computationally expensive task. And that's currently where I'm trying to work, and where the research is trying to bring that to people in a way that is cheap and easy for everyone to use, but maintains the same kind of maintains the silent payments protocol that we need. So that's in a nutshell where it is. There's lots of people working on this, certainly growing number at this time, and my hope is that we can move beyond our current system of wallets and being able to hand addresses out and get to a point where address reuse is a thing of the past.
Yeah, so speaking about privacy, I think I'll also mention that Sparrow covers all the basic privacy practices you should be following. So Sparrow will generate a new address each time. Your change goes back to a different change address each time, and I believe the outputs are reordered.
Yeah.
So it's hard for somebody to tell which output belongs to the sender, the receiver, or the change address. So my next question, also relating to privacy, is network level privacy. How important is it to be running a node? And I know that you select which nodes users can connect to in Sparrow Wallet. These are trusted nodes in the community. So how important is it for people to be running their own node, and how good are these public servers you can join in Sparrow?
Yeah, so look, I think that if you're sitting in this room, you should definitely think about running your own node. I mean, Bitcoin is a decentralized system, and running our own nodes is how we effectively enforce that thing, right? So I think that there's the majority of people out there are not going to run their own node, but if you are sitting in this room, you're one of the very early ones, and you're also interested enough to be doing it. So that's the first thing that I'll say. In terms of the public servers, so the way that the Electrum wallet first began, in fact still does today, is there's a network of servers out there, and it connects at random to one of them. Now, there's no question that some of those servers are run by firms who want to try and track you, right? That's, I think, a known fact, or at least one we would all accept. So what I've done in Sparrow is, rather than connect to some random server out there, I've selected from a list, and I've said, these are individuals that I've interacted with. I can't guarantee that they're not tracing this information, but I think that there's a very high likelihood that they're not. There are other organizations that have done a lot of good work in the space, or individuals, OGs, who have been there for a long time. And I think that really reduces the amount of chances. It's not someone who can just spin up a server and say, I'm going to log everything sent to it, right? It's somebody who's got some standing in the community and has a lot to lose should that information ever come out. So there's that kind of social layer, which I think is still very much part of our world. And if you're not going to run your own node, at least you're connecting to a node that run by somebody who people do sort of have some faith in.
Yeah, I think that's the great thing about Sparrow Wallet is the node you've selected. Although you can't guarantee they aren't keeping logs, they're trusted in the community, and these are good guys generally. So my next question was, LLMs like ChatGPT and Claude are getting very good at writing code. Now I was just interested if you were using any of these tools in the development of Sparrow at all, or not really.
I wouldn't say that I use them to directly write Sparrow code yet. I use them to do a lot of research, and they might suggest write this method this way. So Sparrow code is still written by me, or at least it passes through my hands in order to get into the code base. One area in which I wasn't able to use it was the new Trezor Safe 7. Uses a completely different communication mechanism than the previous ones, which has got a lot to it, and I was able to really leverage them a lot and trying to dig into that, get some of those kind of parts done. If you're talking to a hardware wallet, then the hardware wallet has actually got the responsibility of trust. So long as it talks back to me, then I know, okay, it's got that kind of guarantee that it's not going to accept something which is not sort of correct. Otherwise, it isn't doing its job. So it does to some extent depend on the task, but in the main, I'm still using my own kind of brain and my knowledge to actually write the code. But definitely, I would recommend all devs start using these tools because they really do transform what you can do.
Yeah, I remember Ricardo on stage over there mentioning he hasn't written a line of code in a long time, so I thought I'd ask you that. Final question from my list over here, and that is, if you disappeared today, what would happen to Sparrow? And is there a team of developers who would be willing to take on the Sparrow Wallet project that you know of?
The answer is no. I don't actually know of a team. If I disappeared today, Sparrow would almost certainly get forked, as it's been forked many times in the past. There are forks of Sparrow out there. I suspect that some fork would emerge as the dominant fork before too long. One change that actually has happened of late is Sparrow PRs have been on the rise. So people sending ideas and thoughts in the form of code. And the quality of those is getting better, mainly because of LLMs. I have little doubts that somebody would take it on. I think, one of the reasons that I have kept pretty tight control over it is because I've seen a lot of open source projects. Everyone wants to leave their own mark. That's just a human need. And when you have something like a user interface, you really got kind of ground which needs to be dealt with in a very careful manner. People get used to a certain user interface. They know where to find things. They know how to get things done. And you're trying to pack a lot in to that user interface without overwhelming people. And I think that that's a particular skill set. And if you're not coming with a holistic view of, we can't just add this here because what about if we have to add that and that and that? Then I think you end up in a bad place. So that's kind of, a danger point for a lot of open source where you have a large team and they all kind of want to add their own thing to the user interface. I think that that's where a lot of projects kind of end up with just a mess. And then they kind of have to do a V2 or a V3 where they try and rethink the entire thing, and that's often when they fall down because doing a complete rewrite ends up just being a project that's delayed for years and years. So I'm trying to avoid all of that by trying to really just keep the user interface stable, keep it, evolve it, but not in a way that isn't careful and well thought through.
I see. So yeah, that's everything from my list. We have a minute, 2 minutes left, so we can take a question from the audience.
Yeah, thanks very much. I have two questions, kind of unrelated, but yeah. So the first one is, I'm not sure what the right word for it is, but like estate management or planning, like for your death. If you have dependents or people who you would like to, get your Bitcoin when you die, have you thought about that? Do you have any kind of ideas around what would be a good setup to have a hardware wallet and a cold storage setup that you can also breathe to other people when you're not there? So that's also kind of a challenge. And the second question is related to the whole open source thing. It's definitely for me something I'm very interested in because I've been an open source maintainer for two projects for about 10 years, and so I'm fascinated by the economics of it and kind of just every person has different stories. I'm curious there if you're willing to share what motivated, I don't know if I missed that in the beginning, but what motivated you to create Sparrow Wallet, and is this purely a labor of love, or are you also like earning, like is this your full-time thing that you're also earning money through? Sort of relationship to Sparrow Wallet, I guess, to some extent. That's what you understand.
Yeah, so I'll try and be brief. I mean, both of them are quite long-winded answers, as you can guess. I think from the inheritance point of view, we don't have great solutions yet. I think they're starting to emerge. I think, if you look at the current kind of way of doing it is the decaying multi-sig, which is quite a great name, but anyway. I still think it's too early for widespread use. I don't particularly like the UTXO rotation with the current tooling that we have. I don't think it's really there yet. I wouldn't use it yet. I think right now the reality is the best thing that we have is trust. It's like setting up something that works for the particular situation that you have and trusting people to do the right thing. Unfortunately, that's I think where we're at. I think things will improve, but it's going to take time and lots of thought, and tooling will have to improve. From a point of view of like the economics around open source, yeah, I mean, not great, right, from terms of making money. There is a very good system of grants within the Bitcoin space. We've got the HRF grant program, we've got OpenSats. There's definitely a lot of money in there for people who are doing good work. So I encourage anyone who has a good idea and kind of starts building it, don't come in without any proof of work. But once you have that, there's definitely funding out there, and I've certainly been able to enjoy that in the past. And, that's kind of, it's not, a sort of requirement for me to have it, but it's certainly been great, and I would encourage other people to take this observation. Anyone else?
Sorry, just a quick, just a quick question on, you talked about battle testing the hardware wallets. I try to help a friend of mine do is he has a hot wallet, and Bitcoin got to the point where it's too valuable essentially, although probably now not so valuable anymore. But it's been something else. Again, probably needs a bit of time. What's your view on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's no doubt that if you have somebody who's really not skilled in Bitcoin at all and is probably not going to put the time in, I think the BitKey is frankly not a bad way to go. Obviously, I don't like the fact that it's own closed ecosystem. I'm very much into the kind of open world that Bitcoin provides, and we can move wallets, and we can move our seed around. The one thing about the BitKey I really don't like is the marketing. I think this kind of seedless is best is just not a good message, and I will push back against that. But the actual device has been well thought through. It would be nice if the break glass protocol that they had was not implemented with only their software, and if they wanted to do a PR Sparrow, which enabled it to be used there, I would certainly be open to that. I think we need to kind of bring them into the open fold, if you will, in some way. But I can't knock the BitKey. I think it's good that people are trying different things. I think that that's very healthy, and I'd like to see more of it. So, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Right.
Thanks, guys.
Can I ask a question?
Make it a quick one.
So I saw some scam about with trying to share mobile version of Fire. So it's the question: are you thinking or maybe potentially in the future do a mobile version of Fire?
No, so I find that the desktop version of Sparrow it keeps me busy enough. But actually, when you think about mobile versus desktop, they are dramatically different. And I think the skill set and the thinking and the mindset are sufficiently different that to try and do both is not a good idea. And often when you see a mobile app ported to a desktop, you kind of see a very kind of stripped down, more basic version of it. And there's a reason for that, right? It's because they're trying to take the limited screen real estate of a mobile and move it onto a much bigger one. And if you go the other way, you just see a mobile app with 1,000 little things in it. You can't figure out what's going on. It's because they're just so different. So I think it's not a good idea for me to try and put both of those things, those worlds in my head at the same time. Great. Thanks, everyone.
And just for everyone watching on the live stream, obviously like and subscribe, but then where can we go to get your website information?
Sparrowwallet.com.
Sparrowwallet.com. Cool. You're on YouTube?
Southern Bitcoin on YouTube.
Southern Bitcoin on YouTube. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Check it
Yeah, all together. JC, yeah.
This is a bit crazy. I didn't expect it. I didn't expect it to go down the way it did. It was way more intimate.
Awe-inspiring. I think you come with a preconceived idea. You think you're just talking particularly about Bitcoin as a tool, but then you get to see the incredible impact of what Bitcoin's doing just in South Africa and Africa at large, and that's been incredibly inspiring. I've learned so much, and I've realized the grassroots movement is not only just incredibly important, but is growing and flourishing.
Bitcoin is the way to go. If you are a government system that says you are tired of corruption, Bitcoin is the way to go.
The people on stage are pretty much highlights of the people who are here.
Many ethnicities, many religions, doesn't matter. Bitcoin is what brings us together because we believe that by fixing the money, we can fix the world or make it at least significantly better.
If you want grassroots adoption, if you want ground level adoption, you got to start from the ground, and this is where we are starting. We are starting from ground level. And this to me captures the essence and the spirit of adopting Bitcoin and the reason why I'm here.
And integrated what is happening on the ground, what is the proof of work, what has happened within the last year, 3 years from these different institutions and people.
And if Bitcoin can genuinely bring real hope and real value to people who are trying to build a store of value, well, it can be transformative.
Where is this country?